Failure in the automotive industry doesn't happen the way we think. It's not due to a poorly designed engine. It's not an unattractive car. It's not even a misguided market strategy. The most dangerous mistakes are the ones that appear to be correct decisions. Confidence, growth, passion, traditions. Two brands in completely different markets and at different times moved forward with the same strategy. Both believed they were right. One learned, the other vanished. At the time, this mistake didn't seem dangerous. That's why one company survived and the other didn't. This video is about 5 real cases, 5 pairs of brands, 5 shared mistakes. It's also about 5 proofs that survival is a matter of understanding, not technology. The 1950s and 60s, 2 European brands saw automobiles as works of art. Alfa Romeo became legendary on racetracks. Elegant design, Italian passion. Every model was poetry, crafted with the love of engineers. The Giulietta, the Spider, the GTA, each one was designed to make hearts race. BMW was on the same path, their driving pleasure philosophy. They built compact, balanced, driver-focused cars. Both brands created emotional connections. But something changed in the 1970s. BMW systematized passion. They standardized engineering processes. They made production lines scalable. Each new model built upon the previous one. They embraced platform sharing, modular design. They established quality control protocols that could be replicated across factories. Driving pleasure stopped being just a slogan and became a consistent engineering discipline. However, Alfa Romeo started from scratch with every new model. The designers were free, the engineers were passionate, but this freedom meant a lack of system. There were electrical problems that varied by model year. There were rust issues that destroyed beautiful bodywork. The after-sales service network collapsed because parts weren't standardized. Each model was a masterpiece, yet none were sustainable. In the 1980s, BMW conquered the premium market with the 3 Series. It was a single car family that was consistently produced, developed, and updated for decades. The E30, E36, and E46, each generation improved on the last. Meanwhile, Alfa Romeo was in constant crisis management mode. It was acquired by Fiat in 1986. Models were postponed. The brand oscillated between revival attempts and financial trouble. Both brands shared the same dream: to build cars that would allow drivers to feel. But one brand turned this dream into a reality. The other just kept dreaming. Today, BMW sells over 2 million cars annually worldwide. Alfa Romeo is still producing beautiful cars like the Giulia, but remains a small niche player in the Stellantis portfolio. Passion alone wasn't enough. Systematized passion won. General Motors was the world's largest automotive company in the mid-20th century. Chevrolet, Cadillac, Buick, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, a brand for every segment. At its peak, GM held nearly 50% of the US market. The company was a symbol of America's economic power. GM executives thought, "We're too big, nobody can bring us down." During that same period, Toyota was manufacturing small, efficient cars in Japan. No one took them seriously. However, Toyota had a culture of continuous improvement, Kaizen, just-in-time production. They reduced error rates to nearly zero. Every worker had the authority to stop the production line if they spotted a defect. Quality was more important than hierarchy. The Toyota production system wasn't just about efficiency, it was about learning. Every defect was studied. Solutions were implemented simultaneously across all facilities. GM was experiencing growth after growth, new brands, new models, but inefficiency was increasing at every level. The same platform was packaged under different brands. For example, a Chevrolet, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile might share 80% of their parts, yet be marketed as completely different cars. Customers couldn't see the difference. Labor costs rose. Union contracts became rigid. Manufacturing innovation stalled. In the 1980s, Japanese cars began flooding the American market. The Toyota Camry became the favorite of the American middle class. It wasn't exciting, but it was dependable. Meanwhile, GM was clashing with unions. Factories were closing. Their market share dropped year after year, but they were still very big. They were still number one. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit. GM went bankrupt. They received a $50 billion government bailout. Pontiac, Saturn, and Hummer were discontinued. Tens of thousands of workers were laid off. Toyota viewed the crisis as part of a natural cycle. They restricted production. They optimized costs. They maintained their market share. They didn't need a bailout. Toyota never built a strategy based on being big. Their strategy was based on being efficient. GM believed that size alone would protect them. Toyota believed that discipline would enable them to achieve scale. Result: one bailout. The other, resilience. Being big isn't enough. You need to grow the right way. Volkswagen used software to cheat on emissions tests. Millions of its diesel vehicles were emitting nitrogen oxides at levels far higher than claimed. When the scandal broke, the company was on the verge of collapse. The CEO resigned. Criminal investigations were launched. The stock price plummeted. Customers felt betrayed. But wait, was this only Volkswagen's mistake? No. By the late 2000s, the entire automotive industry was facing similar pressures. Environmental regulations were tightening. Diesel engines were marketed as a clean solution for meeting CO2 targets. However, nitrogen oxide emissions were the problem. Although the technology to meet both standards existed, it was expensive. Manufacturers didn't want to sacrifice their profit margins. Every major manufacturer was caught between regulations and engineering constraints. Some approached the limits, some turned back. Volkswagen crossed the line. However, what makes this story unique isn't the mistake itself, it's the post-crisis response. Most companies try to cover up scandals. They extend legal processes. They shift blame and play the victim. They play the victim. Volkswagen chose a different path. The CEO was removed within days. Full accountability was promised. Over $30 billion in fines and refunds were paid. There was no drawn-out legal battle. Then came the real move, a transition to a fully electric strategy. Volkswagen used the diesel scandal as a turning point. The ID series was developed. The MEB platform was created specifically for electric vehicles. Billions of euros were invested in battery factories and charging infrastructure. In 2015, Volkswagen was the diesel champion of Europe. By 2020, however, it had become Tesla's biggest competitor in electric vehicle production. Other brands experienced similar pressures. Most tried to hide the problem instead of solving it. Volkswagen, however, admitted the mistake, paid the penalty, and changed its strategy completely. Making mistakes doesn't kill you. Denying them does. Volkswagen survived because it accepted the truth and changed. 2008. The world financial system is collapsing. Car sales hit rock bottom. GM, Chrysler, and Ford all went under. But Ford did something different. In 2006, before the crisis began, Ford CEO Alan Mulally took a risk. He borrowed $23 billion by mortgaging company shares, factories, and even the Ford brand itself. Wall Street saw this as madness. Ford was taking on massive debt during good times. But Mulally saw what others didn't. A crash was coming. When 2008 arrived, Ford had cash reserves. While Chrysler and GM begged the government for money, Ford appeared before Congress and said, "You don't need to help us. We have our own plan." Mulally drastically reduced the number of models. He sold Jaguar, Land Rover, Aston Martin, and Volvo. He launched the One Ford strategy. He bet everything on a few key models: the Focus, the Fusion, and the F-150. The turnaround was painful, yet deliberate. Chrysler took a different approach. First, it merged with Daimler in 1998. It wasn't a merger of equals, though. Daimler controlled everything. Then, in 2007, Daimler sold Chrysler to the private equity fund Cerberus. Chrysler went bankrupt in 2009 and was rescued by the US government. Then, Fiat took control. With each merger, Chrysler lost a bit more of itself. The Dodge, Jeep, and Ram brands remained. But what remained of the company's soul? Ford is independent today. It is family-controlled. It is building electric F-150s on its own terms. Chrysler, on the other hand, is part of Stellantis, a multinational conglomerate. It has a name, but no identity. Both companies experienced the same crisis. Both were on the brink of collapse. But one acted early, borrowed when borrowing was possible. The other waited for an outside savior, was rescued repeatedly, lost sovereignty each time. Those who suffer pain early win in the long run. Those who wait for saviors lose their identity. 2007. Two new companies are predicting an electric vehicle revolution: Tesla Motors, Fisker Automotive. Both companies were manufacturing luxury electric cars. They both believed in a green future. They both had charismatic founders with grand visions. Henrik Fisker was a renowned designer. He designed the BMW Z8 and the Aston Martin DB9. The Fisker Karma was an incredibly beautiful car. It had plug-in hybrid technology. It had a solar panel roof. It was environmentally friendly yet luxurious. The Karma attracted celebrities. Leonardo DiCaprio bought one. It appeared in magazines and on red carpets. However, Fisker overlooked one critical detail: control. The batteries came from A123 Systems. Valmet Automotive in Finland handled production. Software was outsourced. Even the hybrid powertrain relied on GM components. Fisker Automotive wasn't a manufacturing company. It was an assembly operation fully dependent on its supply chain. Tesla chose the opposite path. Elon Musk prioritized engineering over design. Tesla developed its own battery packs and software, bought the Fremont factory, and brought production in-house. The company built the supercharger network, pushed over-the-air updates, and transformed every vehicle into a data platform. Tesla controlled the entire value chain. Fisker did not. In 2011, fire risks were discovered in A123 batteries. All Karmas were recalled, but Fisker could not fix the issue internally. Then, in 2012, Superstorm Sandy flooded the port of Newark, destroying multiple Karmas when their lithium batteries caught fire. The images went viral. That same year, A123 Systems filed for bankruptcy. Fisker lost its battery supplier and collapsed in 2013. Tesla nearly failed during the same period. Production delays of the Model S drained cash. Elon Musk invested his own money to keep the company afloat. However, Tesla never lost control. Problems were solved internally through software updates, production changes, and pricing adjustments. That difference was everything. Both companies believed in an electric future, but only one could build it. Today, Tesla is the world's most valuable automotive company, producing over 1 million vehicles a year. Fisker was re-established in 2016, but went bankrupt again in 2024. Same founder, same beautiful designs, same lack of manufacturing control. History doesn't reward those who are right. It rewards those who can put their ideas into action. 5 stories, 10 brands, 1 lesson. In the automotive industry, survival isn't about having the best idea. It's about building the right system. Execution is everything.